Hey friends, I want to tell a story this morning about Dickey Betts and his friendship with Bob Dylan. Now, I learned about this when reading this book, Pledging My Time, Conversations with Bob Dylan Band Members by Ray Padgett. This is really good. If you're a Dylan freak like me, you absolutely need to check this out and read it. Ray Padgett did interviews with over 40 musicians that have played with Bob Dylan throughout the years, and they tell anecdotes and stories of just being around Dylan and what he's like. There's a chapter on Dickey Betts. Dickey Betts met Bob Dylan in the early 70s, and Bill Graham kind of put them together. They hung out for a couple days in a hotel room after a gig. It was him and Robbie Robertson and Bill Graham. He said Bill Graham was playing chess with Bob Dylan, and he hung out mostly with Robbie Robertson. Dickey was really wanting to become a better songwriter at this time, which he's a great songwriter, but he felt like he wanted to learn more. He talks about it a little more, and it seemed like he wanted to talk about Billy Joe Shaver a lot. He kept steering the conversation towards that, and I kind of wish that there was more of that, but he says, I was just trying to learn something, which I did. I don't know what it was, but I learned something. Just listening, being around people like Bob. I used to hang around with Billy Joe Shaver all the time. In fact, he and I ran around together during his whole life. He's one of the great songwriting artists like Bob, but he writes blue-collar, old cowboy, dusty boots type songs. And then Dickey's wife chimes in and says, I think Dylan mentions him in a song. Reading James Joyce and listening to Billy Joe Shaver. Anybody know what song that is? A little quiz for you there. Dickey says, yeah, anyway, that's why I was out there getting to know Bob. It was kind of selfish on my part, but that's the way you learn. You get around people. I'd written songs before, but I was just trying to improve, and it helped. I wrote some pretty good stuff. But Dickey says, I just barely got to know Bob. I didn't hang around while he was writing songs or nothing like Billy Joe Shaver. Bob lives way out in California, and I live on the other side of the United States. I lived in Nashville for a while, and that's where I really got to know Billy Joe. But Bob has always been on my radar. So Dickey says that whenever Bob would play in Central Florida, where Dickey lived, he would always have Dickey come up on stage and play with him. He really seemed to enjoy being around Dickey Betts once they got to know each other a little bit. Dickey says, another time Bob wanted to do Ramblin' Man. I said, you don't know the words to that, do you? And he said, I know all the words to Ramblin' Man. I should have wrote that song myself, is what Bob Dylan says. I said, okay, let's check. If you don't know, just make shit up and you'll do well. So we sang Ramblin' Man. He sang every word exactly the way I wrote it. He says, I mean, he knew it. And he sang it better than it's ever been sung before. And then Dickey Betts does a Dylan impersonation, which I'll try myself and butcher a little bit. I'm on my way to New Orleans this morning. He says he was talking and singing at the same time. It was great. He said he'd just go, and the words meant so much the way he sang it. I'd like to hear Bob doing Ramblin' Man. Maybe there's a recording of that out there. Dickey says he sat in with Bob all the time, and he'd do Rainy Day Women, and then the one time he did Ramblin' Man. He says, I remember in Tampa he had that Western swing band. They had nudie suits and stand-up bass. Oh man, it was totally different from what he had been doing. The crowd, of course, they loved him. I sat there with him that night, and he did Rainy Day Women. Bob was playing lead guitar, and then I would play lead. We'd go back and forth. I asked Jeff Kramer, Bob's manager, I said, Bob is so reclusive and everything, but why am I the only guy that I've seen that he invites to just come backstage? Why is that? And his manager said, man, he would give anything to be able to play guitar like you did. You're his favorite guitar player. And Dickey says, I don't mean that as self-aggrandizing or anything. It sounded like I was, but I don't mean that. It was just a surprise. Bob, he does try to play lead guitar. It's simple, but he does a good job of it. He talks a little bit about hanging out backstage with Bob, and he says that mostly you sit around and talk about songs or boxing, since Dylan was all into boxing, but Dickey says that he doesn't really talk very much, so Bob probably enjoyed being around him just because he's quiet and doesn't talk his ear off. The best story Dickey Betts tells, he says the Allman Brothers and Bob Dylan both played the Clinton inauguration, and he was hanging out. He's friends with Don Johnson, the actor, and I think he was married at the time of Melanie Griffith, and they're all hanging out backstage, and he talks about this incident that happened. And this is Dickey. He says, it was quite a ruckus. There was this guy smarting off to everybody in the green room the whole time. He'd been telling us all that he was a senator. He was pretty mean. I went out to play. The band couldn't play a 3-chord blues. We kept losing the chord change and screwing it all up. So I just walked off the stage, let them do it. When I came back, I guess they had a TV in the dressing room. This guy told me I'd better go to the woodshed if I'm going to go try to play with the big boys. He said this to Dickey Betts, and Dickey's already in a bad mood, but he's one of the last people that you need to go running your mouth at. And Dickey Betts says, I said, you know, I'm about fed up with your bullshit. I've been listening to you all night, and I'm tired of hearing it. The guy says, I'll just take you outside and kick your ass. Says that to Dickey Betts. Dickey says, no, you ain't taking me nowhere. You'll never make it to the door. Dickey says he started to get up off the couch with his fist balled up, so I just knocked him out. He landed right in Bob Dylan's lap. And Bob said, well, I'm glad somebody knocked that son of a bitch out. Dickey says, I split my hand wide open on one of the guy's teeth. There was blood going everywhere. Don Johnson rushed me to the hospital. When I went back to the hotel, I was scared, really scared. God, I done knocked out a senator. What's going to happen now? Stephen Stills calls my room. He said, man, I just want to apologize for that son of a bitch I brought to the show. And Dickey says, you brought him? He was telling everybody he was a senator. And Stephen Stills says, bullshit. He's my damn gopher. He goes and gets me some drugs when I need it. That had to have been a hell of a relief for Dickey, thinking he punched out a senator. Probably be some bad things happen. But he goes on to talk about Bob a little bit. He says, Bob, I don't know if he still does, but he used to practice boxing. He'd go to the boxing gym all the time. Now, every time I see him, he throws a right hand at me in slow motion. He says, hey, Dick, how's that right cross doing? He's talking about, I guess, the Clinton inauguration. So Dylan makes fun of him and teases him whenever he sees him about that incident. Bob Dylan actually name-dropped Dickey Betts in Murder Most Foul. Said, play Oscar Peterson, play Stan Getz, play Blue Sky, play Dickey Betts. And he talks a little bit about that here. And like, what'd you think when you first heard that? And Dickey says, oh, that was such an honor. All my friends were coming to me saying, man, did you hear Bob Dylan mentioned you in a song? I said, no shit. And I heard the song. I was so embarrassed, I'd say. Well, he just used me because it rhymes with Getz. And he'd laugh. And people would tell me, oh, bullshit. But anyway, I was very embarrassed because it was such a flattering thing for Bob Dylan to mention you in a song. I said, when Bob plays in our hometown here again, I'm going to go see him. I had some good times with Bob, some good experiences. When you sit and play music with people, you never forget it. It's well said. I kind of feel like we're supposed to learn about Bob Dylan in this book, which you do, but in that particular chapter, I think it paints quite the large picture of all the facets of Dickey Betts. And I really enjoyed that part, and I recommend you pick up a copy of this. I'll put a link down below in the top comment to it. Full disclosure here, if you're watching this on Saturday morning when I first published it, I played a gig last night at the HiFi. Now, since I made this video before that gig, I don't know how it turned out, but I think it was probably pretty good. It was a sold-out crowd at the HiFi in Indianapolis, and it feels really good to sell out a venue in your hometown. And it just so happens, if you're watching on Saturday morning, tomorrow is my birthday, and I'm not honestly sure how I'm gonna spend my birthday. I typically like to try to do something creative on my birthday. On my 50th birthday, I made an album in my living room in East Nashville. It's called Mount Rinraw. You can find that. It's an acoustic album, and a lot of people enjoyed that one, but it felt good to make something creative, to, you know, just to do something creative on your birthday. Not only is tomorrow my birthday, tomorrow's Super Bowl Sunday, and I don't know if I want to watch the Super Bowl on my birthday. The Super Bowl has never landed on my birthday before. The first one I remember watching was Super Bowl 10, when the Steelers beat the Cowboys. That's the first NFL game I ever watched. It was a long time ago. I may not watch the game. I don't know. My first one I've missed since Super Bowl 10. But I'd like to do something creative. I don't know what that is. But I have a lot to be thankful for. I have a partner, Amy. We've been together for 25 years. She's absolutely wonderful, and I love her with all my heart. And we met at a Bob Dylan concert, and we're both Bob fans, and you know, lots of reasons for us to love Bob Dylan. And I don't know, got a lot of good things in my life. This channel keeps growing. I meet a lot of nice people there. There's a lot of really nice people in my Patreon and channel members who support this channel, and it makes this whole thing possible, honestly. And got a lot of touring this year, looking forward to. Get to go back over to the UK, going down to Texas, going to Florida. You know, lots of good stuff coming up. And I don't know, so there's a lot to be thankful for on my birthday. I might sit around and write some songs or something tomorrow. We'll see. But if you'd like to help support this, throw me a little something in the tip jar for my birthday, or join the Patreon or channel members. But you don't have to do anything. It's just cool that you're here, and everybody's always so positive and nice, and I do my best to preach love and all that good stuff. So I appreciate you guys hanging around and putting up with me, and I'll see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.